Uh, Richard,
Thank you.
could you grab the legal notice when we get to it?
Yes, I will.
Great. Are we ready, Aaron?
Yes,
Great. Will the Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, please come to order? This evening's meeting will be a virtual planning and zoning meeting hosted by Zoom. During this meeting, our procedures will be as follows. 1, when you first enter the meeting, you will be in the virtual waiting room until the meeting host as it admits you. 2, please be aware that your camera, if you have one, and your microphone will be muted by the meeting host when you enter the meeting. You can turn on your camera at any time so you can be seen by others if and when you choose to. In order to run an efficient and orderly meeting in this virtual environment, unless stated otherwise by the meeting chairman during the meeting host will keep everyone other than the commission members muted. You will still be able to hear everything said by the commission members, even if you are muted and your camera is not on. There will be the opportunity for public comment during public hearings, at which time public participants will be unmuted. 3, the secretary will read the legal call of the meeting as published according to Governor Lamont's Implementer Bill SB 1202. During the public hearing, the applicant will be invited to present the application, explaining to the commission and others present what is being requested. The meeting host will share all related documents on the screen as needed. In addition, all applications supporting materials for each application on the agenda are available through the quote public meeting calendar page of the town website www.ci.guilford.ct.us and also through a direct link on the planning and zoning page. 5, comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. There'll be clarifying questions from commissioners. 6, there will then be the opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. Please raise your hand through the Zoom platform and wait to be called on and unmuted. Should this feature malfunction, please send a chat to the commissioner asking to be called on. First, those who wish to support the application may come forward. Second, those who oppose the application can come forward. As this is a public hearing, it must be recorded. It is necessary for speakers to identify themselves each time they speak by stating their name and address. 7, the applicant will then have the opportunity to address any questions or concerns raised by the public or commissioners. 8, once the public hearing is closed, the applicant is free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearing and the regular meeting, during which the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has the right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. Decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling Planning and Zoning Department at 203-453-8039 or by emailing planning.zoning@ci.guilford.ct.us after 9 a.m. All actions taken tonight by the commission will be on a roll call vote. All commissioners and staff will identify themselves for the record before speaking. Seated this evening are the following members. Frank DeAndrea. There we go. Sean Cosgrove. Thank you. Is Scott here? Did Scott make it?
no,
Okay. Alan Brown.
Hey.
There you go. Richard Wallace.
Evening.
Bill Freeman. Jamie Stein. And I'm Phil Johnson. Staff present tonight are George Kroll, the town planner, Aaron Mannix, our zoning enforcement officer, and Lisa Piombino, planning and zoning administrative assistant. This meeting will be recorded via the Zoom platform and made available on the town website for viewing. The secretary will now read the legal notice as the secretary is not here. Richard, would you please handle that?
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on July 21st, 2021. This meeting is to be conducted through a web and phone meeting only. Attendees are advised not to go to the regular community center location because a physical meeting will not take place. See the sign-in information for Zoom below. The meeting ID is 976-5563-9077 with a passcode of 910530. The following applications will be heard. Tammy and Frederick Ulbrich III, 269 Mulberry Point Road, map 16, lot 57-08, zone R5, coastal site plan application for additions and renovations to single-family dwellings within 100 feet of critical coastal resource. Copies of this application is available for inspection in the office of the Planning and Zoning Commission or on the town website, www.ci.guilford.ct.us. At this hearing, persons may attend either by phone or web connection shall be heard. Written correspondence can be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Office at 50 Boston Street, Guilford, Connecticut, 06437, or via email to the planning.zoning@ci.guilford.ct.us or dial 203-453-8039, dated this 8th day of July. Phil Johnson, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much. Would someone like to make a motion to open?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
All in favor, Frank Ian,
Yes.
John Cosgrove,
Yes.
Scott Edmund? Oh, not most Scott. Scott's not here. Alan Brown,
Yes.
Richard Wallace,
Yes.
Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Jamie Stein.
Yes.
I also vote to open. Our first item is Tammy and Frederick Ulbrich III, 269 Mulberry Point Road, map 16, lot 57-08, zone R5, coastal site plan application for additions and renovations to single-family dwelling within 100 feet of the critical coastal resource. Mr. Ulbrich, I heard you say that you're in Michigan with one bar, but I hope you're here to help us understand what you want.
Yeah, yes, this is Frederick Goldbrick. I go by Chris. And I'd like to thank everybody for your time and this thorough process, because of course it's so important to do things right, especially for the environment. And, you know, I think Peter Grasso, my architect's on, and I think he can go in more details, but we're gonna like to add 721 square feet. You know, the house is kind of a older house. We're going to balance out the front door is kind of on the side door. It's kind of on the side. You can see the plan. The foyer would be expanded, straighten out the deck, and then we would add a room for an office and closet space. My wife has all her stuff downstairs. So I've been going through this for 7 years. So this was why we want to do this during the height of the highest lumber prices around. So Peter drew up these plans. We were going to put in looking at a bathroom and things like that, but we took that stuff out. So it's Peter, if Peter can add to that, if Peter Grasso.
Yes, hi. I think you did a pretty good job, Chris. Yeah, we want to balance out the house with a new entrance and just add that den off to the right, as you can see in the plans that I submitted along with the application. And on the cover page of the plans that I submitted, you can actually see the existing conditions of the house and the outcropping of rock on the right-hand side that we're going to be sitting a perch of. And the size, I think, is about 741 square feet, but 750 is close enough.
In this area here.
Yep.
And Peter, they're piers, so I don't think there's digging, right? There's
Nope.
going to be piers on the rocks,
There's
and of course,
very last
of,
pages of the set of plans that I prepared, you can actually see the designation of the piers, which will sit on top of the outcropping of rock. And I tried to enlarge a portion of the site plan prepared by Giuliano and Associates to try to clarify in greater detail where the piers would fall upon the outcropping of rock. There will be hardly any, if any at all, excavation. We're going to drill some 1-inch diameter holes into the rock about 12 inches deep, put some rebar in there, and extend it up into these circular piers that we're going to stick out of the ground. And I'd like to cover those piers with some form of man-made stone pattern around the bottom of the foundation, so the piers don't look as obtrusive. I think if you continue a little further, you might see the pier designation, whoever's controlling the plans. You can see them back. And I think the last few pages might help in greater detail with the pier designation and location.
And Peter, I think Tony, our builder, submitted a plan for the, what do you call it, a barrier?
The sediment
A
control.
runoff barrier?
Yeah.
Sediment control
Yes.
barrier, and which would be put in and then
Yeah.
I assume inspected. But-
Correct.
And,
Are we in a
Yes.
flood zone?
The plan disappeared from my view.
Yep, I didn't want to scroll too fast and give you a headache. This
No
is the zoomed in section of the site plan that you were indicating, Peter, showing the location of the footings.
hmm
It appears here. And I think if we, as you can see, this is all ledge
Yeah.
in here. So minimal excavation. I can go back and show you the overall, as this is a coastal site plan, the overall survey.
hmm
Could help us
And I
work out
believe-
where the
and I
coastal,
believe we're what, 40 feet high. And I canceled my flood insurance because, we really don't need flood insurance for where we are. We're up pretty high there. I believe, but
Better
You guys
double
are the
check that.
experts.
If you're in a flood zone, you're in a flood zone.
Yeah.
well,
It's
Yeah,
Forty-
so there's
it's
a
the
significant elevation change up on the ledge versus the tidal marsh down below.
definitely.
yes,
Um, This is our critical coastal resource. And the property does comply with the minimum setbacks to the critical coastal resource. And as they indicated, the addition will be on footings with minimal excavation.
So we're not in a flood zone, is that correct?
This is outside the flood zone. Based on the elevations, we're up in the 30s.
Okay.
Up here.
Yep.
Chris, we asked that because if there's significant development, meaning more than 50% of the value of a building in a flood zone, then it has to become flood compliant with FEMA regulations. So
yep,
you were
17 feet high
outside
or
of-
whatever it is.
Yeah, you're outside that shackle, which is good.
Yeah, no, I have a home in Florida. I kind of, we know what that is about, which is good. Yep.
And as Frederick indicated as well, excuse me, this is the limits of disturbance as shown around the addition, as shown by his contractor, which would be sediment barrier backed with hay bales.
Yes.
Do we have any memos from town?
We
agent?
do.
Not on the website. In any event, Jamie, you want to tackle the first one?
sure, happy to do that. To the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission from Kevin McGee, Environmental Planner, regarding coastal area management review, Frederick and Tammy Albrecht, 269 Mulberry Point Road, Guilford, Connecticut, 06437. Assessor map 16, lot 5708. The applicant is proposing a 750 square foot addition on exposed ledge. The western portion of the property is located in a FEMA zone VE, elevation 14. The coastal resource policies applicable for the property are coastal hazard area, rocky shorefront, and tidal wetlands. The site plan provides for erosion and sedimentation control measures that are designed to protect the adjacent coastal resources. The work being conducted could have an impact on the adjacent coastal resources if the erosion and sedimentation control measures are not properly installed and maintained. In order to make sure that the coastal resources are protected, I recommend the following conditions of approval. Number 1, erosion and sediment control measures should be installed around the studio building being removed. The Town of Guilford zoning enforcement officers should be notified to inspect the sedimentation and erosion control measures prior to any demolition or site construction. Soil stockpiles should be contained by silt fencing and/or hay bales. Soil erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be maintained until vegetation is established or suitable material is installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer. Number 2, the site should be inspected daily to make sure that all construction debris has been properly disposed of in a covered dumpster.
Great. Chris and Peter, are you okay with those conditions?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Just to clarify, there's a note of control measures to be installed around a studio building being removed. I believe that's a copy and paste from a previous.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which is not, does not necessarily apply to this application.
You don't have to remove your studio building, Peter. Okay.
we might be painting on the rock ledge. Who knows? It's a studio.
I have one other memo from the health department that I can share with you as well.
Frank, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, as long as she could share it, because I didn't see it in the meeting notes.
Yep, this came in last minute here.
All right, this is to planning and zoning from Sonia Marino, our RS and MPH, dated July 21st, 2021, 269 Mulberry Point Road, building addition. The application for a non-flow generating building addition located at the property referenced above will need a B100A application from the health department and soil testing before it can be approved, reviewed by Shirley McKinnon, RS.
Can someone help clarify what that is?
Yeah, thank you.
So the health code in Connecticut does require by statute that the health department review that this particular addition will not reduce or prohibit, well, actually reduce or remove the available repair area of the septic system. So as part of that review, they will take a look, they would want to take a look at the existing sanitary system, the as-built, and may need, based on the ledge on the property, may need to do some test pits to determine that there is native soils there for suitable for repair.
So is that, would we make that a condition?
That would be required prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Okay.
So it's not necessary that it's a condition of the Planning and Zoning Commission
Got it.
approval.
Does that make sense, Peter?
Yes, we're gonna have to try to find out where the septic system is. And get an as-built of that, have that looked at. I think it's on the other side.
Yeah, it's on the other side.
There are likely records in town hall within the health department from when that system was inspected that you could get copies of.
Okay, great.
And we can help you with that.
I had brought that up with the surveyor and he didn't think it was an issue because it was completely away from where we were going and we were not impeding on any excavation. I hardly think that there's going to be any excavation at all. I mean, there's just going to be some, borings, dust. That's going to be a little bit of dust come up from the 1-inch diameter holes that we're going to drill, probably 8 in each pier. So, maybe 64 holes. It probably won't even make, it'll be so insignificant. We'll do whatever we need to do. I just wasn't.
It should be pretty straightforward. And,
Okay.
and town staff is always super helpful in terms
They
of.
have been.
Sure, I'm happy to direct you to either Shirley Mickens, our sanitarian, or our health director, Sonia Marino, to get you started on that
Thank you.
process.
Thanks.
Great.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from
All right.
commissioners? Do we have to take questions from the public? Questions or comments? Any
Yes, this is a
questions?
Public hearing.
Yep. Any questions or comments from the public with respect to this application? Again, what we're approving is what's called a coastal area management application. It's just our way of making sure that what we call the critical coastal resources are protected from any construction activities. And obviously, the construction activities associated with this are pretty minimal. With respect to earth movement is usually what we're worried about. So it doesn't pose any concerns for me. I don't see anybody's hand raised. Richard, speak.
Quick question. Do we have any weigh-in from DEP?
No, this was not referred to deep.
Okay.
Do we have a motion by any chance?
Yes.
Bill, you want to take the motion?
You bet.
Do you have that, Bill, or you need that?
Oh,
shared?
I do not have that.
Sure.
All right, I'll read it. Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a coastal site plan application for Tammy and Frederick Ulrich III at 269 Mulberry Point Road, map 16, lot 57-08 for additions and renovations as shown on quote, alterations and additions, Ulbrich Residence, end quote, 11 sheets prepared by Peter F. Grasso, PFG Design Group dated 29 March 2021. This application is approved. Was there conditions? I'm sorry.
Just those from Kevin McGee.
Okay, with Kevin McGee's conditions. And it is application is approved based on finding that it conforms with the zoning code and is consistent with the coastal management policies of the state of Connecticut.
Terrific, thank you.
Second.
Great discussion. Any problems or concerns? No? I don't see any hands up. I didn't hear any comments. So with no further comment on this, I'll call the vote. All in favor, Frank DeAndrea,
Aye.
Sean Cosgrove,
Aye.
Alan Brown,
Yes.
Richard Wallace,
Yes.
Bill Freeman,
Aye.
Jamie Stein,
Yes,
and I will also vote yes. Peter and Chris, enjoy your project. Good luck with the building materials. Hopefully they come down a little for you.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
I
much.
think it has. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you for
I will be
keeping our
calling
community
tomorrow,
healthy.
Karen. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Excellent.
We'll
Much
be there.
appreciated. Thank you very much, Lisa. You were very helpful.
Aaron,
Thank
do
you,
we want to
everybody.
go straight to Whitfield and Gosam, or do we want to go to deliberation of public? Well, we already did that. So we'll go to regular meeting. Pending applications, Whitfield and Gosam LLC, 103 Whitfield Street, map 33, lot 103, zone C1. Site plan application for addition and renovation to existing multifamily structure, including fencing and landscaping. Request for action on July 21st. Is someone here to present this on behalf of Whitfield and Gosam?
Yes, hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Cristina Monroe, and I'm here with Jorge George Garces. Thank you for taking the time to review this project. Jorge?
All right, thank you, everyone. How you doing? We're just here because Mrs. Monroe wanted, update her house. As you see in the blueprints up there, she want to put some new siding, building a small brand new roof in the front of the house, new deck in the back, and install new fence in the back of the house.
I can share the screen for you, Jorge.
Okay, thank you, Erin.
Just to familiarize yourself, this property to the north here is on the corner of Whitfield and Water, where Amrone's restaurant is. And this multifamily dwelling shares the parking lot. These properties are under the same ownership. So it is this residential building that is the subject of the application. The new portico area would be here fronting on Whitfield Street, as well as a mudroom addition here in the back corner and a new deck.
Correct. Yep.
And some fencing here. Kind of coming around, actually just connecting to the deck area, the fence.
Correct.
I can show you our floor plan here. This is the mudroom addition here in the rear, and this is just an alteration to one of the units here. Section, we have some elevation drawings here I can share as well. This is the rear elevation area that we're talking. This is existing and proposed.
Erin?
Yes.
This is Jamie. Can you help me understand what is triggering planning and zoning review here?
This is a commercial property.
Okay.
This is in a C1 zone. So as an addition and alterations, it's subject to a site plan application with the commission. This has also gone before design review committee. And the applicant has received feedback from the committee. And I believe based on the minutes of that meeting, the only item that the design review committee is seeking additional information on is the actual landscape plan. that
Correct. Yep.
would come back for further review. And as you can see, here's the front portico on Field Street. And the fence would be a white vinyl picket. Okay,
And this is the building just south of where Amarone's is, right? The restaurant?
yes, exactly.
Yes, next to it. Correct. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's a
Phil,
pretty-
you don't happen to have that on Google Earth, do you?
I can pull it up quick.
I looked at it.
Is there a proposed landscape plan, Erin?
There is not at this time. That would be a subject of a future review. There are some concerns over the size of the trees in the parking lot in between the residential building and the commercial building. That the root system is causing some damage to the parking lot. I believe it was John Cunningham in the design review committee who did offer to take a look at that and work with the applicant. And the applicant would return to design review committee for specifics and recommendations for plantings around the front of the house as well as on that parking area.
Okay,
And Aaron, is the parking lot part of this property?
It does share. I'll show you.
So I'm sharing the Google Earth image. So this is Amarone,
Right.
the building. Here's the building next door. It's across the street from Pages.
Right.
And there's a smoothie place right here right now, I think. I don't know. So you kind of get the idea. Maybe I can see if I can.
So who owns the parking lot, and where Aaron mentioned concerns about roots in the parking lot?
So these
Sure.
trees,
Yeah, she owned both properties up there. Mhm.
these are under the same ownership. The property line, I believe, is in the driveway portion. I have to look at the site plan, but I have
I'll just jump to the GIS quick. Hold on.
to wait till you're
All right.
done screen sharing.
So both buildings are owned by the same owner?
Correct.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And they're both in the C1 zone.
Right.
and isn't the lot south also owned by the same owner? Didn't this come before for a conversion
That's the one next door.
residential to commercial?
So I'm going to screen
That's
share.
correct. The adjacent property is also owned by the same property owner, although there's 3 separate parcels. So I could show you
I
here.
got this, hold on. So if this helps from a property line standpoint, this is the Amarone's building.
Yep.
This is the building we're talking about. And this is the building next door we saw several months back.
Right. Right.
So, and I don't, believe there are any issues with respect to floods or anything like that.
Yeah.
No,
So they all kind of share those, the parking lot as a group, basically?
yes.
Now, what is the shading that I'm?
Sorry, I put in current FEMA flood mapping.
That's flood overlay. This is
Oh.
not in a flood zone, or it is in the zone X
Yeah,
portions of the property.
so we don't even deal with anything until it gets to AE.
Yeah, that's over to the left. And the right.
Yeah, right. Hey,
We good on the stop on the share?
Sure.
Okay.
This is not a public hearing. This is a site plan modification. If
Okay.
the commission has any questions for the applicant.
Great. No, I mean, looks like a nice little addition. I'm sure it'll add some nice outdoor space for the applicant. And we don't have any concerns with respect to coverage, do we?
No.
Okay.
This complies with the zoning regulations.
That's what, nothing sweeter to my ears than hearing that.
Me too.
to all ears.
Any questions or concerns from commissioners? Do we have a proposed motion?
Phil, I had a
Richard had his hand up.
Richard, go
quick
ahead.
question.
Yes, sir.
Are they going to be coming back because of the design review and the landscaping and the plantings to us, or?
I would think that we shouldn't have to see it unless there's a problem with design review, which I don't foresee that happening.
Okay. just procedural.
Yeah, I understand.
Voted that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission approve a site plan application for additions and renovations to existing multifamily structures at 103 Whitfield Street, map 33, lot 103, as shown on quote, proposed site plan, Whitfield and Gosum LLC, end quote, 8 sheets prepared by the applicant dated 7/1/21. This application is approved with the following conditions. 1, the applicant consider implementing the recommendations of the Design Review Committee as described in the minutes of the meeting on July 14th, 2021. This application was approved based on a finding that it conforms with the zoning code. Oh, it's up there too.
Great.
Moving along, Frank. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who got that? Bill, I think you sunk in on that one. So we have a motion, a second. Any discussion or concerns? Good. I'll call the vote. Frank DeAndrea,
Aye.
Sean Cosgrove,
Aye.
Alan Brown,
Yes.
Richard Wallace,
Yes,
Bill Freeman,
Aye.
Jamie Stein.
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Great. Enjoy your addition. Thank you for coming and doing it all the right way. Appreciate it.
All
Thank
right,
you
guys.
very much.
Thank you, every
Thank
single
you.
one of there. Thank you, Erin. I really appreciate your help.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rain. Thank you.
Before we move to Glenn, I just wanted to circle back with the commission with respect to the 311 Old Whitfield Street application for Eunice Demond. As you may recall, at the conclusion of our last meeting, I kind of tasked you with thinking about 4 specific things. The first one is Eunice Demond's Little Rascals Rescue Facility a philanthropic, charitable, agricultural, historical, and cultural institution or society not conducted as a business or for profit?
Yeah.
Table 4, line 16, uses allowed by special permit. And then under the special permit considerations, does this use promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community? 3, is the animal rescue rehabilitation facility a permitted use in the zone R3? And 4, is rehabilitating wild animals in a residential zone district a quote customary incidental use to a residence in a residential zoning district? We'll probably be acting on this application at our next meeting, but my hope was to kind of gauge the temperature of the commission so that we can have town staff appropriately draft motions to reflect which way we're going. So if you're comfortable chatting about how you feel about it, I'd encourage you to do so. If you would rather not, that is your prerogative. And if anyone wants to jump in first, feel free. Otherwise, I'll call on you.
Well, I do have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Have we gotten anything from our council as requested yet?
We did have a meeting. I joined a meeting with Aaron and George and Chuck to ask whether or not this specific use falls under table 4, line 16, uses allowed by special permit. And help me if I'm wrong here, Aaron, I'm misquoting, but I think the general sentiment was that's the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission to decide, and not legal counsel.
That is correct.
Yeah, sorry about that. You know, it doesn't overwhelmingly surprise me that it gets kicked back to us because there's some judgment involved associated with this. And, you know, I guess his position was you could try and make a case for it or case against it. And that's why we're tasked with this assignment.
All right, I would request that he would give us something in writing and turn something in. He's done it before. I think that's a kind of the easy way out, and that's not what we're looking for. I think a lot. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I'd like him to give us some reasons, either for or against, yes or no, why he would say it can go either way. I mean, it doesn't have to be definitive, but he should give us something more than that. I will definitely request that. And maybe I can get in touch with him because I'd hate to go to my own council and spend my own money to figure this out.
No, don't,
George?
no, don't do that, Frank. I think one of the things that Chuck did recommend is that when Aaron and I draft motions for this, for your consideration at a future date, that Chuck will review those motions with us to make sure that they're properly drawn and represent the best wisdom of, all of us in terms of how to make a decision and how to defend that decision, whichever way you go. So I think that will at least partly answer your question, Frank, because there are more legal issues than just whether or not this meets that particular, meets the definition of a facility, a philanthropic, et cetera. So Chuck will be intimately involved in our drafting of the motions as we get ready for the decision on whatever that date is.
That sounds
I
good.
think it's important that Chuck help clarify what is the definition of a philanthropic or charitable organization. Do they have to be registered as a 501c3? And if so, then behooves Eunice to move her whole project forward to have that kind of registration. And I think that,
well, one of the things he did say was that the words that we just read do not explicitly require that kind of registration. But if the commission was of a mind that the activity met generally the parameters of that definition and met the other criteria of a special permit, that could be a condition of approval, that the property or that the facility be properly noticed under the taxation laws or whatever they might be. So that was a comment that Chuck did make in our deliberations. So that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Jamie. Just for the record, I want to note that Bill Freeman did take himself off camera when we started this discussion. I don't know if we said that.
Sorry about that.
In attendance on the phone. But second, I had some questions, George, that would probably benefit from the weighing in of Chuck. And one of those questions is about conditions on special permits. I think there was a mention of how maybe we can't really hold a special permit to conditions legally. And I want some clarification on that, because in my time on the board, I have definitely seen many special permit applications that were approved with conditions. So I just want some clarity on that particular.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're actually referring to, but you're quite right. I mean, that's the whole purpose of a special permit, is that it is a unique use. Has unique characteristics. It's very site specific, particularly. And the employment of conditions is very much a part of the special permit process. Now, there's some types of conditions that are not permissible, but as a general rule, I think you're quite right. The application of conditions that would, for example, mitigate what might be some of the adverse impacts of a special permit use, those are very much the kinds of things that would be part of a special permit approval. Absolutely.
Yeah,
but there are, on the other hand, certain types of special conditions that you can't do. And that's one of the reasons why we'd have Chuck review this carefully when we draft motions.
I see. Okay, so to further explain this, Phil, I kind of went back in the history of special permit approvals that I've been a part of on the board, just to look at the different applications within the residential zone that related to nonprofit, philanthropic, animal care, animal upkeep, animal boarding, animal raising. And, there has been a variety of those types of uses permitted via the special permit with conditions in just my short history on the board.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. The most famous one recently probably is the fairgrounds and agricultural society. We went through quite an elaborate
special permit
review of, right.
Hey, Phil, what was the second of your points that we should have considered?
Does the use promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the community?
I think under certain conditions it probably does, but the conditions have yet to be determined.
Yeah, I mean,
I think one of the most important aspects of this application and this decision is if you do find that this is a use that's authorized by a special permit, then the special permit requirements as a general rule ask that you look at the specific application before you, the specifics of the use itself, and the specific property and neighborhood in which the use is allowed. Again, that's one of the reasons why you have special permits. Special permit means that in some circumstances it's appropriate in that particular in a location. In another circumstance or on another site or somewhere else, that same use might not be appropriate. That distinguishes the special permit use from the use that's allowed by right, or a so-called site plan use. A use that's allowed by site plan approval means that if it meets the quantitative standards of the regulations in terms of setbacks and coverage and all those other things that you're familiar with, you are more or less obligated to approve it. In a case of a special permit, you have a lot more judgment, as Phil said, that's required on your part to determine whether or not the specific use fits within on the specific property in which it's proposed to be located. And also then, as Jamie was just talking about, are there things that you could apply as conditions to that special permit use, the approval of that special permit use, that would mitigate what would otherwise be perhaps unacceptable adverse impacts in that particular location. So that's one of the, that's an important way that you administer the whole special permit process, if you follow me there.
Yep. And Phil, the third point you made?
Is animal rescue and rehabilitation facility a permitted use in the R3 zone? And the final one, while we're kicking it around, is rehabilitating wild animals in a residential zoning district a quote customary incidental unquote use to residences in a residential zoning district?
I think I'm correct in this. Our regulations do not address your point 3.
Correct. To the best of my knowledge.
That's correct. There's no use that's used that describes that. Yeah, that's right. There's no explicit terminology that makes that a permitted use in a residential zone, for sure.
And so, George, while you're willing to weigh in on this, Phil's point 4 is, whether this use was the word you used, Phil, permitted, or
it's customarily incidental?
Customarily. Okay. So in your many years of being in your current position, George, have you seen anyone use a residential zone for this purpose?
I can't think of any examples. Again, it kind of depends on what you mean by the words rehabilitating and rescuing animals. I mean, that could be something that you do in your home. You find a cat, a stray cat, and you bring it home and you take care of it. That's one extreme. We probably wouldn't consider that to be a use. That we would probably consider that to be fairly customary. But be a more extensive version of that, maybe not. Is that it? Is that an answer to your question?
Well, it does, but it speaks to the both point 3 and point 4 is that our regulations do not specifically speak to this issue.
Right.
But they also
does not, and the application The application before you is, I'm sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
Sorry, George, I'm just saying they don't specifically rule
The
it out.
application before you is for a
That's-
special permit.
That's true. That's true. But the question,
The app,
whether they should and
The
whether that's,
applicant-
you know,
Well, and again, our regulations don't list all the things that you can't do.
yeah,
They list the things that you
that's
can.
the things you can do.
yes, right.
Right.
It's kind of, if we listed all the things you can't do, it would be a much thicker book.
But that's inherent.
The
flexibility in the zoning code. Sorry, George, I've
The
interrupted.
application before you is, no, it's easy to do it in this format. The application before you is under the provisions of the special permit for philanthropic, charitable, and so forth. So this is not an application that asks you to consider whether this is, an allowed use as accessory. This is an application that asks you to consider this particular activity as described as under the special permit for facilities of charitable, et cetera.
Table 4, line 16.
That's
Right, that's
the
right.
case of ambiguity right now.
Alan, how you feeling?
Well, first of all, we are a group that is trying to decide what we're going to do with this. Whether the loss is this or the loss is that, it's going back and forth. We're going to make special restrictions. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. I think the first question I'm going to ask you is how many of you have taken the time to go over and look at the property? How many of you have seen or see? How many of you have seen the property? Have you?
I have.
That's two. I see two.
Oh, I think-
No, it's more than two. It's more like 5 or 6. And
Yeah, Frank- Frank's got 2 hands up.
I'm assuming that includes you, Alan.
Yeah, really think so? I went over there and I looked at it. I looked at the property. I looked at the cages. I observed everything that I thought was necessary. I didn't smell any odors. I didn't have any flies that I had to slap around. I didn't see anything that was disturbing from the point of a bad smell or anything like that. She keeps her place pretty clean. All the cages and everything are all clean.
Well, Alan, I'm not sure how long the cages have been empty. I believe they have been for a while at this point.
Well, the point is that the state of Connecticut has gone in there and checked her too, because it was brought up and they went in and checked to see that she was doing the job, and they said she was doing the job well. One thing that strikes me is that when a situation comes up where an animal needs help, a lot of times the police department will send the person over to her, and she immediately goes out and takes care of the problem. She works diligently to try to take care of these animals. Her heart is in the right place, and she's doing a service to the town and certainly to the people, a lot of the people. And I think that these are things we need to consider. What you want to, restrictions you want to make, everybody take the time to sit down and figure out what restrictions you want. But I think that the thing that I didn't think that many of you went over there, but I see that it was about 5 of you that went over there. So at least we're doing the job the way it needs to be done. But let's try to come up with an answer for this lady and not drag it on and on and on. And personally, I think that it's a good thing. She's doing a good thing for the town and town people, and I think it's needed. And that's it. So,
All right. Richard, you want to chirp in, or you?
I'm with Frank about the thing. We've got to nail down, and the whole nut comes down to that table 4, line 16. Is where it rests. Nobody's denying that it's a that it's a useful service provided. But again, is it what she says, or is it how she's applying for it?
Okay.
And we got to go by and our job is not to, we make a lot of hard decisions here. We got to go by the letter of the code, not by emotion.
I hear you. Thank you. Okay, with that said, I will conclude our discussion on this, and we will have some more and hopefully be able to come to a decision on our August 4th meeting, which is our first meeting in August. I will see what we can do about pressing forward on some more specific definitions that might help us in this process. So I don't, because this wasn't an opened item, it's already closed, we can move on to our next. So if anybody's here and wants to listen to the zoning code rewrite presentation by Glenn, I'd encourage you to stick around. And if you're not interested, I'll see you later on the 4th, probably. Glenn, you've got the floor, my friend.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Hi, Glenn. Thanks for your
Hi,
patience.
Glenn.
We ran a little behind.
No worries, no worries. Tonight, in terms of the review of the zoning regulations, we're going to pick up on section 3. Section 3 is residential districts and uses. And if it's okay with the commission, I'm going to share my screen and just bring the text up so that we can make sure we're all looking at the same thing. Is that all right?
Great.
That's fine. Yeah.
You guys sure we don't want to do this with Scott around? He picks up on everything.
All the
I
time.
know. Yeah, well, you know, look, Frank, I think he's been auditioning for a job somewhere. You know.
Good for
I
him.
think he's going into the legal profession.
I
There you
know.
go.
Or the nitpicking.
Nitpicking.
Yeah, but he's good.
I know.
He is good.
He will catch a typo even from about 5 miles away.
All right, let's stay on track.
Okay.
Come
All right. Okay.
Okay, guys, so we've taken the residential section of the regulation and made some changes to this. The first of which is we've added a purposes section. We really didn't have that today. The purposes section talks about the intent is to divide the municipality into districts suited to carry out the purposes of the regulations, provide for housing opportunities and choices consistent with soil types, terrain, infrastructure capacity, implement the POCD, et cetera. And also point out that certain non-residential uses can be allowed when the commission finds that they'll be appropriate for the proposed location in accordance with the standards contained in the regulations. So the big thing here, I think, first of all, is the addition of a purposes section to the regulations. Any questions or thoughts on that?
So just one question, Glenn. I mean, number 1C, provide for a variety of housing opportunities and choices consistent with, so soil types. I mean, is there anything that you might get to that goes to the, you know, hot issue of the day, which is multifamily housing?
Yeah, I think, well, let's back up. Since the time that this draft was prepared, the legislature adopted Public Act 21-29,
Right.
which modifies a lot of the provisions in section 8-2 of the statutes, which are the purposes for the regulations, and those purposes are going to carry forward to here. So I think for the commission's, I guess, knowledge, overall, I'll be working with Aaron and George to go through Public Act 21-29 and figure out, as part of this effort, how to integrate that material in, and whether or not we do it as part of this effort, or whether the effective dates on those statutory changes are such that the commission is going to have to pick those up separately and move ahead with those, depending on our time frame.
Right.
So I'll coordinate with George and Aaron on that, just to make sure that we keep you guys within the confines of statutes and other things.
Okay.
I think the biggest change in this section of the regulations is that what we've tried to do here is create a user-friendly table that specifies exactly what's permitted and how it's permitted in different residential zones. The table which you have in the current regulations blends a number of zoning districts together. And we actually found some situations where the text in the table and the district, the language in the regulations themselves weren't always totally consistent. So we've tried to create a scenario here where we've clearly sort of spelled this out. So for example, here in the residential district, section 3.2a lists the residential uses that are permitted and the permit type. The X's indicate it's not permitted at all. And then we have no zoning permit or zoning permit, commission approval by site plan or by special permit. And then there's some situations in the regulations where there's different types of approval depending on the size of the facility. So I think
So
that,
Glenn, so this is just really to put in graphic form what is in our current regulations?
I think it's to blend the table that you have today and the text that you have today into a new format. If there are changes being proposed, Sean, we've called these out in the margin by LPZC. So these are the things that, I want to bring to your attention here, because our goal here, I think, as Aaron had indicated earlier in the process, is not to get too far afield without letting the commission know the types of things that have been discussed. So the one thing here for discussion, I think, is this line item in the table between 2 and 3, which is the current regulation about conversion of to a two-family dwelling. The provisions in the regulations today start to get fairly convoluted in terms of the house has to have been built before, what was it, is the 1940 was the year? Was that the scenario?
Yeah,
Actually,
that's right, Glenn.
yeah, so I don't have it, the text right in front of me right now. But it seemed somewhat tortured, and we felt that language really wasn't working effectively. So the idea here was to strike that from the table. And if the commission wants us to modify that regulation and leave it in, we can go ahead and propose that sort of language here as well. But again, the current regulation, I think George had indicated at one point in time in his recollection that the regulation had never been used.
Yeah, that's correct.
I think we're seeking some guidance from the commission on this.
Glenn, this is Jamie. Forgive me, I don't know Public Act 21-29 backwards and forwards, but are we close to what was required about allowing, as of right, a second dwelling unit in any
Yes.
residential zone?
So the regulations, Public Act 21-29 deals with accessory apartments
Okay,
and indicates that by January of 2023, regulations have to be adopted consistent with the statutory requirements for accessory apartments, or the municipality needs to opt out of those provisions by a action of the Planning and Zoning Commission and by the Board of Selectmen. So George and Aaron and I have a little bit of work to do again to figure out the overall time frame here and how we're going to integrate that within this section of the regulations.
Okay, so, but it doesn't require a referendum. It's just by act of the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Selectmen.
That's my understanding, Sean, but I'm still digesting Public Act 21-29 also. With a number of the provisions in there.
yeah, sorry, Glenn, it's Jamie again. I think just for ease of, going back and finding those spaces where this has come up before, if we could just make a notation, as you've done here in the TEL PZC sort of margin about, integrate or propose action or something around Public Act 21-29.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just have a question. I'm struck by this. And Aaron or George can weigh in. I mean, in line number 2, one two-family building per lot only allowed in R1?
Yes, currently that is the only zone that allows for a two-family dwelling as of right. And that, where it says a two-family building, it would be a building that consists of two dwelling units as opposed to two separate single-family structures.
Right, right.
That's our current regulation.
That, I mean, I'm curious about that, and we can table it, but I'm just curious about that.
I'm curious how, Sean,
What
where it's allowed or why it's in one building?
why is it there and only in R1 and not allowed in any other residential districts?
I think this is a scenario, I think, Sean, where we're carrying over what's in your current regulations. And if the commission wants to make a change in that regard, this would be a good time to do it while we're working on the regulations.
I'm throwing it out to the commissioners.
I would guess it's probably based upon existing structures at the time of the zoning code implementation, that there were multifamily houses in the R1 district. I'm shooting from the hip, but that's.
Well, I think hi, this is George. I think that's partly correct, but this has been a provision that's been in the regulations as long as I've been familiar with them. The only zone in which a two-family dwelling is allowed by right is in the R1 zone. And it reflects the fact that Guilford zoning is more or less restricts uses by right to single-family homes. And that's been our raison d'etre in terms of zoning. That's been the basis of our zoning since 1950, whatever it was when we first started creating zoning. Now we have lots of other provisions for allowing multifamily housing, through planned residential development, through affordable housing development, through accessory apartments. But the only place you're allowed to have a two-family dwelling by right, meaning you don't need any zoning approvals, is in the R1 zone. It's a significant discussion to have if you wanted to allow in other zones the creation of two-family dwellings by right. One of the unique features, for example, of the accessory apartment regulation is that it has to be owner occupied. Either one of the units, either the primary unit or the accessory unit has to be owner occupied. That's not the case with the two-family dwelling as we're discussing herein. They both can be rented. They could be investor-owned property in which both units are rented. When the zoning regulations were originally drafted, the idea of a two-family dwelling in anywhere other than around the center of town in the R1 zone was considered to be inappropriate. Whether that's still the case today is what we're all about right now.
Hey, George, would two-family also be multi-generational?
No, it really has nothing to do with the relationship between the families. If that's what I understand your question to be, there's no reason why the two units have to be occupied by people that are related in any way at all.
Would it just be holding down to where you're in R1 zone, quarter acre? The more dense population is going to be in the smaller land, smaller zones?
Yes.
Okay.
If I may, would the commission like for George and Aaron and I to have a conversation here about these two lines in the table and come back to you with perhaps some suggestions or modifications?
Yes, please.
I love that.
Thank you. Yes.
We're on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next thing I wanted to point out for the commission is there are several new items here in this table, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later this evening. And those are, we have modified the approach to conservation subdivisions to try to make them more flexible and more capable of reacting to the natural resource constraints, in particular issues related to a particular site. We proposed a more flexible approach for planned residential development. We'll get into those details later. We've created a provision for an incentive housing development, again, with providing for some housing options and housing choices here. And then special housing development, which is particularly, I think, for the Housing Authority and other nonprofits creating affordable housing in the community. And all of these could be permitted in all zones, excuse me, except for the conservation subdivision, which is R6, R7, and RA. These three choices here would be permissible by special permit in any of the residential districts. And then we can talk about that once we get a chance to get into the nitty gritty of the regulations themselves.
So I'm not going to talk for very long, but are we adding more instances and opportunities, and are we just adding more special permit situations for the Planning and Zoning Board, Planning and Zoning Commission?
I think these are special permits, Sean. So
Okay, all right. So I just want to make sure that we're not, layering on more special permits. That's all. Thank you.
I think there are new flavors and new approaches for how to address housing and other related issues, given changing age demographics, et cetera. So again, I think let's go into later on in this section, we'll get into the nitty gritty, and then we'll come back to this table and say, is special permit the right approach, or could we do some of these, through another method?
Thank you.
I don't think there's too many other major things on this page in terms of talking to the commission. We've done some subtle wording changes with regard to some of these, et cetera. But again, provided clarity, we think, here in terms of the types of permits that are required. On the next page, again, we're now categorizing these by community or institutional uses or other uses and activities. And again, as you can see, most of these are by special permit in residential districts because these are generally non-residential uses. So it gives the commission some additional review authority and discretion. The ones which are outlined here for site plan approval only are buildings, uses, and facilities of the town, the state, and federal government. Essentially, everything else requires special. When we finally get around to finalizing the regulations, by the way, these sidebars will disappear. We're using these right now for comments. So the pagination and the spacing on the page will change a little bit. So that deals with issues related to principal uses. And the next pages, I'm just going to drop this down a little bit. The next page deals with accessory uses and structures. The tables are set up the same way with the same symbols. And that identifies what's permitted and what type of approval is required overall. We have general accessory structures. These are things, dog houses, bird baths, tree forts, swing sets, things which are generally customary. I think the language the commission used earlier this evening, customary, subordinate, and incidental to the house or to the residential use. On the following pages, we get into specific provisions. This relates to parking and storage. You may recall at our last meeting, we talked about the definition of a commercial vehicle, outside parking of a commercial vehicle, outside parking of a second commercial vehicle now requires commission, or zoning permit review, storage of recreational vehicles, these types of activities, the level and type of permit that is required. Keeping of animals is listed here. There's a section later on we'll be getting to in terms of that issue. Home-based businesses, what happens in terms of home-based businesses. And then housing, lodging, and related activities, and then other accessory uses and structures. I think on this section here, this is look at page 3-6 here. I think this is another area that George and Aaron and I are going to have to do some additional review on, particularly with regard to the issue of the accessory apartment. we had moved ahead and made some changes to the accessory apartment regulations, and essentially allowed it by zoning permit if it was within the house or attached to it, and a special permit if it was detached. And again, the statutes have made some changes and added some provisions in terms of what the commission can or cannot do. And so we need to go back and revisit this, and I'll move ahead with George and Aaron on that. The other thing we wanted to bring to your attention is also on this page, it's down here is number 8. So the correct citation here would be 33 B8. You may recall in terms of earlier discussion of lodging facilities, we wanted to allow for long-term rentals. If somebody is on a sabbatical to some other place and they want to rent their house for a year, they can do that. We also want to recognize the fact that Guilford is a coastal community, and there are some people and situations in town where houses get rented in the summertime for a week. We're concerned about was short-term rentals, and we've defined those in the regulations as rentals of less than a week when the owner is not in residence. Those are the types of situations which some communities have experienced issues with. We've defined that as short-term rental. And I think the observation or the question we're asking for the commission here is over in the sidebar here. Whether or not the commission would like to see those or have George and Aaron deal with those or approach it in some other way. There was a bill in the legislature earlier as part of this session that would have required registration of short-term rentals with the Department of Consumer Protection. And they would have had a very extensive licensing process, but that bill did not advance. So we're not quite sure what's going to happen with that in the future. So Guilford may want to start thinking about how and whether to address this particular issue in town. So that's what I've highlighted here in yellow.
And so our regulations don't define, Glenn, what a short-term rental is.
Not at the present time. Is that right, George and Aaron?
Correct.
And so I think that is worth our consideration, is whether it's something less than a week, whether it's a week or more. I just think it's worth considering.
I think the way it's set up right now, we've defined it as a weekly rental, long-term rental, and now we've pulled out short-term rental. So as you can see here on line items 6 and 7, a monthly rental and a weekly rental is allowed with no zoning permit required. On the other hand, we've kept it blank here for short-term rental, and we're looking for feedback from the commission that, is this, what do you want to do with this? So we'll continue to track that.
Okay, all right.
To the best of my knowledge, and Aaron and George, you just, the only time I can remember something coming before us was on, what was the name, White Horse or something like that, George, where a home got rented and let's call it an extended family came in and had a great party. Where was that?
I think you might be thinking about, there was up in the Guilford Lakes area, somebody was renting out their house for like parties and things like that. Is that what you were thinking of?
Well, it wasn't, no, they had rented it out. I don't know if it was for a week or for the weekend, but there was a community beach and the renters brought in their extended family and rocked the house. I mean, they had a good time. And then the neighborhood association went crazy.
Yes, right. Now I do remember that. I thought it was resolved by the neighborhood association.
I think it was too.
Yeah, the neighborhood association tried to retroactively ban rentals, and it was determined that they couldn't retroactively do that. They could do it on a going forward basis after a period of time. And
it didn't result in any zoning changes, I don't think.
But I guess
that's what we're trying to address here.
Have there been significant concerns presented with respect to short-term rentals? I haven't heard many or any.
I'm not aware of any.
Not regular, no. I have a lot of inquiries, people looking to purchase property. you know, what our policies are on Airbnbs, things like that, short-term rentals. I think there are some challenges having it in the zoning code, and I think we kind of discussed this with Glenn, that or some towns are doing by ordinance, where there's it's a little easier for enforcement.
Yeah, right.
You know,
I agree.
somebody rents
The other thing is the definition, because I know there's so many different definitions for short term. I mean, it could be, some people consider a month short term, and
Right.
long term 6 months to a year or annual. So
I agree, Frank. I agree. So,
Okay, so what, I got another question about like Airbnb or VRBO. If somebody rents their house out for a weekend, would that fall under this, the way it's written, Glenn?
It could, because I think the way that the short-term rental is defined in the regulations, there's two conditions, I guess I'll call them. One of which, or two questions that I would ask, is it more or less than a week? And you just described a scenario that is less than a week, it's a weekend. And my next question would be, is the owner in residence? And if the owner is there and they want to rent it out for the weekend and have people, it's going to be more effectively and well managed than if it's the owner is not in residence, in which case it has the potential to be a party house. I agree with what Aaron said. I think,
Glenn, is that more the norm in terms of other towns' regulations, and how have they addressed, in your view, have they effectively addressed this whole issue of short-term rentals? And this would primarily, you know, be along the shoreline.
I think a couple of things here. I think communities are all grappling with this issue. Some have had more significant examples of abuses than other communities have had. And who knows what's going to happen in the future. I think, as Aaron had pointed out earlier, that zoning is not the best tool to deal with this. You know, if somebody decides to do it in violation of the regulations, and we're going to try to track them down after the fact and give them the zoning citation, et cetera, it really becomes a challenge for us. An ordinance is a much more effective tool for something like this. The enforcement tools are much better, but this really is a question for the commission. If the issue of short-term rental is of concern to you, George and Aaron and I have put together a construct here in items 6, 7, and 8 on this page that leaves out monthly rental and weekly rental and says those are okay. But if it's less than a week and the owner is not in residence, then the commission could put it in here. It's not the best approach, but it's a zoning approach, which may be better than nothing. And I leave that to.
But have you seen other towns move on the current conditions and anticipated conditions in the future? Ordinance, is that what other towns have done?
John, I can't say that there's a clear direction about what other towns have done. Everybody's still feeling their way on this.
Okay.
And there has been moderation on things like Airbnb because of some of the tax implications and now the lodging taxes and other things that are being applied. So it's not quite the issue that it was 3 or 4 years ago, but it is an area which isn't fully addressed in your regulations. If the legislature had passed the bill this year with regard to registration of these types of facilities, I think it would have addressed a lot of these issues and concerns. And we might not be talking about that this evening, but they haven't. And so it's up to you. If it has not been an issue in town, then you might say, we don't feel we need lines 6, 7, and 8, and we can go ahead and take those out. If on the other hand, you say, you know, let's put it in now and take it out later, you can do that as well. It's really here for your discussion, and I'll highlight that as we move ahead as well.
All right. On the next item, I just had one question about, and this might be better up to George, and HVAC equipment, emergency generator, and similar equipment. I mean, you know, do people come to you and ask you whether they can put a Generac in?
Yes.
They do. Okay.
Generator.
You gotta locate it on your site plan, I think.
It requires a zoning permit and a building permit.
For a Generac?
For an installed
Emergency
generator. For a permanent one, not for a temporary one.
Okay. Okay. Because I just got to believe that there are a lot of people who put them in without a permit, because I've seen them all over the place.
That's one of the number one permits that we receive
Okay.
in the office.
Yeah, usually you won't find an electrician or a gas company that would pipe it or wire it without pulling a permit.
Without pulling a permit, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Aaron, this is Jamie. I'm just curious if you could just, not quite back of the envelope, but not a huge effort either, but provide us with a list of kind of like the top 10 most asked, most requested, frequently asked questions of the zoning enforcement officer. I mean, I'm just kind of, I'm curious now. It's
What
come
can
up.
I do?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Can I subdivide?
Yeah, I mean, I know it sounds simple, but in a way, it's so intriguing to me because, the earlier one about short-term rentals, it's probably happening a lot, but it's only ever been raised in my time on the commission. Yeah. With Attorney Beatty had a complaint from the Sachems Head Association with the one lot that was looking to subdivide. So
Sachems Head, and that, just to clarify, touch base on that again, the short-term rentals. So Guilford has two special act communities, Sachems Head Association and Old Quarry Association. They have their own zoning enforcement officer and their own zoning regulations, their own planning and zoning commission. So Sachems Head Association does have zoning regulations for short-term rentals.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure. I am assuming that Old Quarry does as well. I do not have that in front of me. So there are some areas of town. We also have a seasonal cottage district in Guilford where most of those houses are short-term rentals. Exactly, Leeds Island Association area. And I think those are expected areas of short-term rentals, and we receive little, if no, complaints.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this, but it just brings up another point. Just hearing from a diversity of stakeholders, because I remember conversations with the Guilford Green Business Association. I forget what they call themselves, but they're interested in offering opportunities for people to come and stay short term around the green. So it's location specific, I think, is what you're saying to me, like the idea of cottages and perhaps to increase weekend density with our little shopping area around the green. So I just think there's an awful lot of implications here, not just trying to prevent a big party from happening.
As someone who's planning a wedding in August,
there you go.
I can tell you that there's some significant demand for short-term rentals. But,
That's the last thing I wanted to add in on this. I have the Airbnb app on my phone. I just looked it up. It says there's 82 places in Guilford.
but are they available?
These range from individual rooms.
Right.
So it's an issue which maybe hasn't been an issue. Maybe it won't be in the future either, but we'll just highlight that for future discussion.
I'm somewhat of the mindset, if we really haven't had a problem, to not make a problem.
Yep.
But let's see if we can get some more information on that.
Yep.
I'm with Phil on that one.
Okay.
That's okay, Brian.
The next, I guess, 8 pages are the listing of area and dimensional requirements for each of the zoning districts. Now, in the current regulations, you have sort of a table format that's got the different lines and the different zones in it. And what we've done is we've gone specifically to 1 page per district to list all of the information for that district. And then you can pull the page, print the page, whatever else you need to do, but it lays it out for you. We've made a couple of changes as part of our work on this, and these are all the sidebar notes. I just want to bring these to your attention. There was a provision in the regulations that provided for a greater setback from a scenic road. And the problem we actually found with that is that sometimes there's actually the closeness of the house to the street as part of what makes the road scenic. And also scenarios where a road could be designated as scenic in the future, and then the house becomes non-conforming with regard to setbacks. So we've recommending to the commission for your consideration that we've got setbacks already from a state highway, a collector road, or another road, and we just didn't feel that we needed to impose the scenic road setback if that wasn't really part of the overall designation.
Okay.
There was another situation in the side yard setbacks where the regulations were set up that it might say something like side yard setback 10 feet minimum, 25 feet total. And what that means is you can have one side yard setback at 10, but the other one's got to be 15 to get to the 25. And so you create scenarios, which is almost like sort of potluck in terms of where you want to put the addition on your house. And if you had the bad fortune that the side you want to put the addition on is the side you have to have the 15-foot setback on because the other side is already at. So it's just, if all neighbors believe that in this particular zoning district here, that the side yard setback is 8 feet, then 8 feet is what you get, right? And you don't necessarily get 12 feet on the other side. So you could still have two houses which are 16 feet apart, or if the side yard setback was 12 feet, you could have two houses which are 24 feet apart.
Yeah.
For
Right.
kind of crazy reasons. So we're recommending here for your consideration that we just go with the simple minimum side yard setback and roll from there. Provides flexibility for first floor additions, for people who want to put master bedrooms on the first floor. It can free up quite a lot of stuff, and it shouldn't be an imposition on the neighbors.
I like this because it's user friendly and it's commission friendly.
We thought you might like that.
Yeah.
There had been a provision in the residential districts of a setback from a vehicular right of way. So for example, if you had a parcel and somebody had a vehicular right of way through your parcel, not only was your property encumbered by the travel way, but now the zoning regulations also required an easement from that, or excuse me, a setback from that. We said, hang on a second here. If I agree to give an easement on my property, I'm going to cite it in the place and location I'm comfortable with. The only people who are affected by that is me. I granted the easement, or I bought it with the easement, and we didn't think the town needed to get involved in variances for inner setbacks and other stuff like that. So we're proposing to delete that requirement in the residential districts.
Okay, makes sense.
That does make sense.
In the residential zones, we removed the maximum floor area limitation. And then because the issue in the definition about basements and attics and when and how those were included. And we felt that we had good provisions in the regulations related to lot coverage and height that would manage this. We didn't think this was a significant issue that required a maximum floor area limitation. I did do some work in Madison in their shoreline area, and they felt that they needed to do this. And they did establish a maximum floor area limitation, but we don't think that situation exists in Guilford. So again, we're suggesting that that could be eliminated. And then in the smaller residential zones, we added 5 feet of building height to accessory buildings because I think, some of the scenarios there for the accessory buildings were providing some challenges and difficulties. So we added 5 feet there. So we think that this table format will work well. It clearly specifies your minimum lot area, contiguous area, lot shape, frontage, setbacks, building projections, coverage, and height. And you can easily identify the zone you're in. There's your standards and you're off and running. And then for consistency, we kept that for the same format for the R1, R2, R3,
Good.
R4, R5, R6, R7, and R8. So
That's great.
again, get into the regulations, find your zone, find your use, find your dimensions, and most people will be off and running at that point in time.
I had one comment, Glenn, that was brought up to me. In this section, and I think as a note, and I don't know if we discussed this at our last meeting or not, so I apologize. But for example, in the R1 district, on our table notes number 2, where we mention if any part of an accessory building is within 15 feet of the principal building on a lot, it shall be considered a part of such principal building for the purposes of front, side, and rear yard requirements. This is something new also that's in our zoning code. And I don't, if anybody can recall that we discussed this, then I'll let it go. Otherwise, I did just want to bring it up that in this sense, if you end up connecting in time your accessory structure to your principal dwelling being 15 feet, then we're not creating any non-conformity. Sometimes we have a detached garage and then, several years down the road, the property owner looks to infill that area. And now we have an accessory structure setback rather than a principal dwelling setback on that side or front or rear yard. So this is actually a similar regulation that Madison has that we incorporated. And as I'm reading it, I was kind of thinking this through. We're still looking to maintain the accessory building height if the structure is within 15 feet. We don't discuss building height in this note, but if the accessory structure is within 15 feet of the principal building, do they get the principal building height allowance? I'm just thinking, Glenn, I don't think we discussed this at our.
No, my thought, Aaron, would be that if it's connected to the principal building, now it's part of the principal building and you get the principal building height. Okay. But if it's not, then it's not part of the principal building in terms of the height issue, because the scenario you described could create two sort of very tall buildings next to each other. I think that's once they're connected, yes. Before until they're connected,
then you can add on.
Correct.
Make it taller.
So if somebody wants to do that, then they're going to have to figure out a way to connect the two buildings, and then it becomes part of the principal building, and then they can go up.
Didn't we see something to that effect in the other meeting where you had a visual of the building being closer and farther away than 15 feet?
Attached versus detached. I think that was the definitions. Yes, Bill, you're right. I couldn't remember if we talked about this at that point and explained.
No, we did not talk about the height. That is for sure.
Yeah, we did not talk about
within 15 feet.
No.
Okay.
So someone could put a breezeway between a garage and a house and it's within 15 feet, and then it would be able to be the same height as the structure that's the existing building, the primary structure.
I don't have the definitions in front of me, but I think we'd have to go back and look at that. You may recall when we were talking about the definitions, we had something crazy in the current definitions that talked about an unbroken line. Or,
yes.
And I think we said, listen, for it to be attached, it's got to share a common wall, I think is what we said. So a breezeway by itself, I don't think is enough.
Yes, it's a common vertical wall.
Thank you.
Oh, boy.
Sounds like a tunnel to me.
Yeah, right.
You can put windows in it, Phil. Come on.
No, I mean, I have a basement in my garage. If it was connected to my house, the question is it part of that? I don't know.
Aaron, maybe you want to go out and do an inspection at Phil's house tomorrow? Just to
No,
make sure.
It's Glenn, great seeing you.
Motion to adjourn. All right, so that's the basics for the residential districts, and I think it's important because that's probably 80%, 90% of the land area in town. But we've also added in some other things for the commission's consideration here. The conservation subdivision regulations here, we're proposing a new approach to provide some real flexibility in terms of how a lot or parcel gets laid out in terms of this development pattern. Now, granted, much of the land in Guilford is developed, so I'm not sure how many opportunities there may be to use this new approach, but a number of communities have found some real satisfaction with this type of approach. And let me just sort of explain it to you here overall. Basic premise of this regulation is that you are permitted under the regulation through a kind of a mathematical calculation, a maximum number of lots. And then you get quite a bit of flexibility as how you want to lay those out on the parcel. We're really not going to get too involved in the details of this. The mechanism for doing this is that we compute the developable area on the parcel, the amount of developable land, so that you can't count wetlands and steep slopes and floodplains and water courses and other stuff like that. You multiply that times the density factor, that gives you the number of housing units that you can create, and now you're ready to go to town. The basic approach that is recommended in the regulation is that, let me get there. The process is meant to be that you essentially look at the location of the natural resource constraints first and identify those as being conservation and open space areas. And then you establish some perimeter setbacks and buffers, and you lay out the lots on the parcel in terms of where you think that those should be, and then draw property lines around them. So we've allowed for sort of a two-step approval process here, where people can get conceptual approval of the design concept and then go ahead and do the detailed engineering and subdivision design that comes with it. We've added in review considerations in terms of open space preservation enhancement, natural resource protection, farm or forest protection, protection of scenic and cultural resources overall as part of the process. So it is different than the format that you use today, but it caps the maximum number of units that you can get based on the developable area on the parcel and gives design flexibility for somebody to lay out a compelling plan that the commission would review through a special permit process to make sure we're okay.
Right, Glenn,
Right now, we allow them to include wetlands as part of their coverage, don't we?
Yes.
I think the density factor builds all of that in too, Phil.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, so we had a situation, I don't remember what we did about it, if we approved it or not. It was off Route 1, Route 1 West on the south side, I think. And there was an issue, there was just a question about the, buildable aspect of the lots. But so the question for Glenn is, have other communities that you've dealt with taken a similar approach to the whole buildable aspect of this and planned residential development?
I think most communities that I've had a chance to work with have gone in this direction, partly because I feel strongly enough about it. I recommend it to municipalities that if you don't make some deduction for the natural resource constraints, then there can actually be pressure to push development into and closer to the wetland. And so that's a result that we often don't want to see. And in fact, people can sometimes get more housing units in a conservation approach than they could in a conventional approach.
Yeah.
So this type of scenario where we're valuing the buildable and developable land, I think is the most environmentally sensitive approach. And then just give freedom and flexibility in the configuration and layout of the lot so that people can take advantage of the best sites or not have to argue with other setbacks, et cetera. Depending on the size of the parcel, you could have 60-acre parcel with 20 acres of natural resource constraints. There's 40 acres total, and in the R6 zone, that means they get 20 lots. Lay them out wherever you want. Connect them by a road, etc.
I guess one of the concerns I have is for a developer that is inclined to remove, let's call it rock, and create a more level lot out of one that might be considered a, slopes greater than 25%.
Yeah, right. That's a good point.
We have kind of something similar to that going on now. But I mean,
If somebody's out there blasting rock fill, then they're probably going to come under the earth excavation regulations because they're going to exceed those thresholds to get to the point where it makes enough of a difference that it might, affect a lot or two.
I don't know. It's tough to measure those things.
We have USGS maps. We have all the wonders of GIS these days. So I did some work for a municipality where they actually went through and computed the developable area on each lot because it was a simple GIS exercise. And that information became part of their database. And so if somebody wanted to consider a conservation subdivision on the parcel, all they had to do was go look up what the developable land area was and multiply times the factor, and all the risk got taken out of the subdivision process. They knew how many lots were possible on that site.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be kind of a hide and seek or hunt and peck approach. With the GIS system, we could actually compute this for every parcel in town.
Yeah.
And would you mind telling us who, what that municipality was?
I got to, let me think about that, Sean, because I remember doing it, but I can't tell you right. It was in Northwest Connecticut, but I can't tell you exactly who it was. I'm making a note to myself here to figure that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, Glenn, this is Jamie. Also, I just want to make a connection to that type of analysis would be useful when we're talking about the creation of multifamily housing on smaller lots that would have to have some sort of septic system. I think this has come up a lot. It was one of the first things you showed us on the first page this evening was the idea of capacity for infrastructure and lot size. And Sean asked this question about multifamily housing. I think it will help us kind of reconcile with some of the things that I feel may get included in our amendments coming from Public Act 2129, which is, we seem to be relegating denser development on the smallest lots in town, which would, one could also see them as being prohibitive because of the size of the land and the ability to accommodate a septic system for a large amount of housing. So I'm just asking that we kind of make that connection between smaller lot sizes can't actually hold large amounts of multifamily housing, but larger lot sizes could. And this idea of developable land or land that could hold a septic system, I think, is also important.
Thank you, Jamie.
Got it.
The only other item I wanted to bring up on the conservation subdivision was that this is a similar thought process to our current open space subdivision process. Although with the removal of where this is allowed, we did remove the R5 district from that. So this type of conservation subdivision is only permitted in the R6, R7, and R8 zone.
Primarily North Guilford.
Right.
Back on that last page 16, rear lots are strongly discouraged in the conservation district unless good cause can be demonstrated to the commission. I guess that's given us the special permit control over that.
That's correct. You went through that similar concept in the subdivision that
Yeah, I think we did, yes.
Long Hill Estates East. where the commission weighed the number of interior lots.
The next major section here that we've proposed is a new section, planned residential development. This is a new approach compared to what Guilford is doing today. So we essentially kind of rewrote the entire section. This allows, this is page, for anybody who's looking, this is page 3-20 in the regulations, which you should have received. This is allow a PRD, which is intended to be a more flexible residential approach in any residential district. So people can come in with an application for the commission to review through a special permit process. Permitted uses here are single-family detached dwellings, including multiple dwellings on one parcel, two-family dwellings, multiple family buildings, supporting facilities such as recreation facilities, accessory buildings, and accessory uses. So it's meant to provide quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how somebody may lay a development out here overall. We've laid out some development standards here. The minimum parcel size is 5 times the minimum lot size in the underlying district. So it varies depending on whether in the R1 or the R8, what size parcel you need to work with. And the density is flexible depending on how much affordable housing you might choose to provide. If you don't provide any affordable housing units as part of this proposed planned residential development, then the density is intended to approximate the density that currently exists in those zoning districts. So this is simply just a more flexible approach to lay it out. On the other hand, if you propose 10, 20, or, just noticed that, look at that. I think this,
30.
yeah, I think that's mostly
There's
30.
Scott.
I'd like to tell you that we did that on purpose to see if, anybody was reading. But
Where's Scott?
I know, exactly. You would have been all over that, right? We'll tell him we were thinking about him as we read this. But then these would be the density factors that could apply in this situation. And so again, the commission gets to review and approve this by special permit. But the purpose here is to provide flexibility for residential development, more housing choices. And then if the affordable units are provided, depending on the density or the percent level that you choose to go, the density factor would adjust accordingly.
And we have a defined definition for affordable.
I think we've tried to, Phil, in terms of following the statutory requirements for deed restricted units. But the deed restricted unit is, reserved for 40 years, et cetera. I believe I'm just looking ahead here. I thought we had, let me find that, Phil, for sure.
Mhm.
We do have a definition of affordable.
We do. I thought we had,
I think we followed the state definitions, Glenn.
I think we do, George. I think I thought I had pulled it out in a way that organized all the provisions so we would refer to it once. And of course, here we are now looking for it and I can't put my fingers on it, which, but I'll answer Phil's questions. I'll find that information.
Well, I guess my question, does the definition of affordable relate to income or assets?
Income.
Income.
So you could have $10 million
No,
in assets, but you don't make much money because you put them in a savings account. And so that's your only income. And you can take the affordable unit.
so the definition of how you compute the income is based on assets, Phil. So there's a imputation of what the assets will produce in income. And if you're not able to achieve that, well, then that's your fault. But the issue is if you have $10 million, that's probably going to, it will definitely disqualify you from being eligible for the units.
If there's an imputation of income, yes, that would do that. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Great.
So this, let me just think here in terms of other things. There's elements here in terms of design, landscaping and buffers, open space, parking. George and Aaron, I'm just going to circle the parking because we've got to go back and revisit this based on the new public act. Road specifications, the application process. Pre-application review is strongly recommended before somebody goes chasing this too far, to come in and sort of give the commission a sense of what they're talking about.
Right. Good.
And a formal application, which is a special permit, and maps and plans that identify what it is that is being proposed.
Glenn, this is Jamie, just so I can fully understand what the PRD is. I'm thinking of two past proposals that came before us, and we were in this quandary of, well, we have to change the zone before we can allow for the development that the developer aspires to put there. One we didn't approve, and that was adjacent to Amarones, the property we looked at earlier today. The other one we did approve, which was adjacent to the Red Roof Inn on Route 1. Is this gonna get us out of that pickle?
This is set up as permitted in all zoning districts by special permit. So anybody could apply for any site anywhere, and the commission would go through the special permit criteria that are going to be, we'll talk about that at a future meeting in terms of in the regulations, that criteria that are being recommended for the commission's review and consideration, and the nature of what's being proposed. And we put standards in here with regard to, you know, design, landscaping, buffers, open space, recreation, parcel size, setbacks, building height, all of the other things to give the commission the tools to review it.
So this removes the hurdle of having to do the initial change, the zoning change.
Correct?
If the residential zone though, Jamie, some of those were not residential.
They were commercial. I think they were both commercial.
Well, they were residential trying to flip to commercial.
So
Right, they were commercial sites trying, wait,
Oh, to residential.
No, the one on Route 1 next to the Red Roof Inn, that was
that
was a residential zone.
oh, it was like an R5 or something.
Yeah, this
Right.
is,
This-
the answer to your question, Jamie, is yes, under most circumstances, this
Okay.
is a vehicle that hopefully will enable that to happen, subject to commission approval.
I see,
Right.
thank you.
And we do also, when we get to commercial, have another option to present of the.
Ah, I see, okay, thank you.
Yeah, very similar to this.
I just have a question for Glenn, and maybe for Aaron, assuming you attended the meetings that took place, I'm not even sure how long ago. There was a big effort to engage the stakeholders in this whole process, and I just would be interesting when to provide color for the commissioners, if you could tell us, which aspects of the changes that are being recommended are coming from, which stakeholders, the applicants, the developers, even the residents that you may have engaged with. So I'm wondering how much of this is the result of your engagement with the overall community.
I would say that the bulk of the impetus for these changes came through my interactions with George and Aaron. I think there's provisions in your current regulations that aren't working very well effectively. They're kind of frustrating even for staff in terms of the regulatory provisions. And the question is, are we stuck in this situation, or are there things that other communities are doing that might provide a model for us? And so I shared some examples with George and Aaron of what other communities have done with regard to these regulations. We talked them through and thought that these did provide an opportunity for some flexibility to address some of the challenges that Guilford's faced in the past. And that's why we wanted to share them with you. I think you'll notice here as we get into the next section here, there's this note here on the side here that this concept is conceptual only, so that we can discuss this and share ideas. And I think that at some point in time, we're going to have, I would encourage the commission to have an informational meeting for the community and get feedback from people to say, I think this is the worst thing I ever heard. And other people may say it's the best thing I've ever heard. So I think that these are tools which can hopefully help Guilford address some of the land use opportunities that it may have and address some of the impediments it might have in its current regulations.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the next section of the regulations here, which is the incentive housing development. This is again a new approach which could help address situations which are near transit stations, within regularly scheduled bus service areas, near concentrated developments such as the town center, or an area with existing planned or proposed infrastructure that might provide an opportunity to kind of, create a village, or, even in terms of the town center south type of approach, some other type of situation that might allow for the development of a village or a hamlet, or some other type of approach that is a little bit different than the PRD. It does have an affordability requirement of at least 20%. So that's a component of this as well. That allows for diversity of housing types, depending on what the applicant wants to propose: single family, two family, attached townhouses, multifamily, mixed use buildings, etc. The density factors are maximum density factors, again, related here to the buildable land. And it depends, again, on the building form that they want to choose. It does indicate here that a multifamily dwelling could be up to 20 units per acre of developable land. And that would be a very different characterization or feel than if it was single family detached, which would be up to 6 units per acre of developable land. But this is, again, part of the discussion, I think, to have with the commission, and that's why the blue note was on the first page. It says, look, this is for conceptual only, and the numbers can be adjusted or tweaked or modified, but this might be a development tool that might have some use and applicability. Certain types of, go ahead.
I think it's worth discussing. I just think that our lack of sewers has to require a modification of this, because 20 units per acre is just not probably going to work. I don't know.
I had the same thoughts, Sean.
I think the community that I know that adopted this is actually, some of these numbers may look familiar to George and Aaron. When the state established the incentive housing zone program 10 years ago or so, these were the minimum densities that they required, and we converted them here into maximum densities. So we can coordinate, I think, with the health department on this and try to figure out what we think might be reasonable and appropriate here.
That would make sense to me.
Yep. Aaron, am I going to need a section 100A application?
Likely.
So you're talking shop now. I don't know what you're.
That was the one where we had the addition, where they wanted to make sure that the addition wasn't interfering with the septic requirement.
There you go.
Oh, okay. All right.
I was paying attention. Come on.
Okay. Of course, you're chairman.
That doesn't mean I don't get to nap.
So again, this is a special permit process. So many of the provisions in here related to the application process are similar to what we talked about before. The next section we wanted to bring out for your consideration was this section 3.8, special housing developments. This is basically to provide for the housing authority and other nonprofit housing development proposals. Sometimes the state or federal funding requirements can create situations which are hard to describe in a set of zoning regulations or even anticipate up front. And so this says, listen, if it's being proposed by a housing authority or a nonprofit housing development whose mission is housing, then under 8.2i, which basically is a section of the statutes that says that the end result is the creation of affordable housing, the commission can just about do anything it wants. So we've created a flexible approach here that only applies in that situation. A housing authority, or B, a nonprofit housing development, nonprofit corporation under section 501c3. So the area and dimensional standards can be established by the commission as part of that proposal. Again, this is a special permit. They are strongly encouraged to come and see the commission up front so that, we make sure. I think at one of our last meeting, you had a presentation, the town, I think, was partnering with, who was it, Aaron?
Correct. So that's the Neighbor Works, the Woodruff Affordable Housing project is similar to this, and the commission also saw not that long ago, last year, the Green Planet development on State Street, which was also under our affordable regulation, which is essentially the same zone, just renamed.
Yep. And I think, again, this could be a flexible approach that might provide the applicant, the commission, with a more streamlined approach. So this is also here for your consideration.
Is this meant to sort of run parallel to the 830G statute, but allow the commission to be involved?
830G is a little bit different because 830G is basically an applicant does not have to comply with your regulations or even follow a particular regulation. I would suggest an applicant would not fall under section 3.8 because this is limited to the housing authority or a nonprofit corporation. But it's quite possible that they could fit under the incentive housing development or in the PRD, planned residential development approach. That might be a situation. But the 830G statute essentially allows them to propose things not even in its own zone or one of your existing zones. They can just propose the development.
I know. Okay.
The last thing that section here overall is section 3.9, which is other regulations. Again, we took a stab back in the spring about modifying the accessory apartment regulations to share with the commission. The approach that we had suggested here when we laid this out was that if it's within or attached to a single family home, that staff can approve it through a zoning permit approach under these standards. But if somebody wanted to propose a detached unit elsewhere on a single family property, then that would have to come to the commission.
Hey,
And
Phil,
again,
I mean, Glenn, I did circle number 2, subparagraph C, character.
Yeah.
Should that be in here?
Well, the special permit language is problematic.
yeah. So, I mean, I think the statute, the Public Act has changed the word character to, I think it's
Physical characteristics.
physical site characteristics.
All right, so I would strike character to replace it with that.
Yep. And I think there's some other provisions in here too that, for example, this regulation requires a operable door on a common wall. And I believe the statute says you can't require that.
Operable door on a common wall? What does that mean?
What it means is that
Between units.
Yeah.
if you have 2 units in a building not connected by an operable door on a common wall, they are 2 separate and distinct units.
Oh,
Municipalities that I've been involved in, if you require an operable door on a common wall, it becomes discretionary now to the owner whether they integrate it into their house by opening the operable door or they close it off as an accessory apartment accessed separately.
The new language is regulations shall not require ADU or accessory dwellings to have an exterior door. So it's not the common.
How do you get out?
yeah, right.
Doesn't have to be connected to the principal, and it doesn't have to have more than.
You get a parachute.
Get through the window.
Yeah.
Does
Well,
the,
I think in the Public Act 2129, Aaron, here, I got it highlighted on the screen. The regulation shall be prohibited from requiring a passageway between any such accessory apartment and any such principal dwelling.
does 2129 address the requirement that the owner must reside in either the principal unit or the accessory apartment?
They're not restricted to homeowners or relatives. So the accessory unit does not have to be restricted to family members.
Right, and that's never been, I mean, our case is that you can live in one or the other.
Our
Yes, there it is
requirements
right
are
here.
that the property owner live on the property.
So I think this is the language right here, Phil. The
Oh, we can
regulation
see
shall
that,
be
Pete.
prohibited from requiring a familial, marital, or employment relationship between occupants or a minimum age. I haven't found anything yet on the owner issue.
I just have a cheat sheet in front of me on it, like a,
We all,
from APA, their little,
Yep.
cheat sheet, but I have to read through the actual language.
Yeah, I think we should, Aaron, because I think there's some other things in here that I think I ran into Mike Ziska the other day, and he was talking about some of the inconsistencies that he's found in this language, which make it challenging to comply with all aspects. So I think we need to get a grip on this and come back to the commission now with a proposal that recognizes, if you will, what the statutes are now saying.
Okay.
The interesting part is, I mean, 21-29 really is trying to incentivize, call it, you know, a more diverse and affordable housing, you know, landscape. Correct?
I think that's fair, Phil.
And so, you know, potentially restricting the accessory apartment or requiring the residents, I mean, I guess it gets you out of the, you know, non-resident landlord having 2 units. But it doesn't exactly increase the stock, so to speak.
Well, some people have argued that it could double the stock. In other
Yeah,
words,
I actually,
if every housing unit is allowed to have a second housing unit, you've doubled your housing stock. I don't know that that's going to be the effect. I don't expect that to happen, but I think there's some unseen elements to this that we need to kind of think through. The statute says that if the town's regulations are not updated by January 1 of 2023, town is not opted out, then the statute overrides local zoning and this goes ahead. So I think that gives us about 1.5 years to figure out what our approach will be and get our regulatory approach together. And do what we think works best for Guilford.
Yeah.
I think accessory apartments can address a lot of housing needs, and just need to make sure we get it right.
yep,
yeah, and I agree with that. Thanks, Glenn. And I also feel like it offers a very diffuse option, whereas many of the other affordable things we're looking at here are actually larger scale developments. So this idea that diffusing or allowing at a very small scale to have that, you know, that housing option, I think would add to the diversity and density.
I think that's also
I
one of the
think,
reasons.
I think it would,
Jamie-
I think it would improve the density and the availability, but I don't think it addresses affordability.
No,
No,
it
not
doesn't.
that you put an affordability, I guess, on it.
Well, one of the, I mean,
Branford counts some of their accessory dwelling units as affordable.
I don't think you're gonna be able to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Aaron.
no.
if, I don't know what the new law requires, but if there's a danger that if you require that the accessory unit be preserved in an affordable status through some kind of deed restriction or similar instrument, you might end up discouraging people from creating affordable accessory
Yeah,
dwelling
that's
units.
right. I
Uh,
agree, George.
I'm not saying that that's the desired goal. I'm just saying that if
No.
you're thinking about the affordable aspect of it, it's
Right.
not addressing that.
No, the decision that this town made in the 1960s not to put in sewers, or the 1970s, really, you know, we're handcuffed. You know, our ability to create any kind of density is based on sewage capacity. And end of statement.
Right.
You know, that's it.
But-
And density equals affordability.
but also renting kind of, yeah, I think we need, I'm glad that Glenn and Aaron and George are entertaining larger discussion on this, because I feel like there's so many places that you could go. I mean, if you are given a housing option in which you are not paying property taxes, I think, in certain terms of a rental property, I think that could be, viewed as affordable. So I'm sort of, yeah, I'd like to have more robust conversation about what constitutes affordable.
But a property owner who is renting is going to be paying property taxes. So
Sure, the property owner, but not the renter.
it's going to be passed on.
Oh, well.
Well, it's amortized into the rent.
Yeah, right.
And then the washer breaks.
Yeah, right.
Spoken like a true landlord.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, no, it's worse when it's much worse when the air conditioning breaks, believe me.
Yeah.
All
The
right.
next provision that's in section 3.9 here is related to home-based businesses. And what we've tried to do is create a hierarchy of different levels of home-based businesses. As we're all aware, in the past year, more and more people are working out of their houses, and it's changing the way the business gets conducted. So what we've offered here for your consideration are 3 flavors or levels of home-based businesses or occupations. The first one is a minor home based business or a home office. It's by the resident, only the residents. They might have, a visit by people up to 3 per day or up to 10 per week. No retail sales or personal services, entirely within the building, limited visibility from off the premises, and up to 25% of the dwelling floor area. So it's basically somebody's working out of their house, maybe a couple, spouses are each working out of their house. But it allows for that type of scenario. And the most operative thing here, I think, is that we're suggesting for your consideration, no zoning permit would be required for this. It would become a customary incidental accessory to a house. A moderate, and this would require a zoning permit from the ZEO, is when now we're picking up non-resident employees, we're picking up related visitors during a day or a week. And this could be a piano teacher, somebody else is coming in to visit, or other things like that. Still doesn't allow for retail sales or personal services, still has to be entirely within the dwelling, but may occupy a little bit more floor area. And so the zoning permit here is just to register with the town so we know what's going on and we're able to mention and manage it. And then the third level is a major home-based business, and this requires a special permit. If the business is conducted by anybody who's not a resident, if there's no resident employees or more than 2 non-resident employees, multiple visits, if there's any type of retail sales on the premises, or any portion of the activity occurs outside of a building, or it's more likely to have an impact on the abutting properties, now you're into a major special permit and having to come and visit the commission.
Hey, Glenn, what are personal services?
Hairdressers,
Oh, okay.
massage therapy, a lot of different types of things. The issue is those types of activities generate or can generate quite a bit of traffic and change the nature and the character of the neighborhood.
And they're generally licensed too.
They can be.
Yeah.
But the issue would end up being, we're trying to come up with a construct here that reflects the impact to the neighbors and the neighborhood. So, I mean, people can be trading, millions or billions of dollars on Wall Street off a computer, not having any impact on the neighbor. But
Right.
somebody could be running a landscaping business or something else and, beeping trucks and now hang on a second here. That is more significant.
Yep.
So this is again for the commission's consideration here overall. We've organized the provisions related to bed and breakfast in section 3.9C. We deleted the requirement that the building has to be at least 5 years old. If you want to build a new bed and breakfast, you still got to get a special permit from the commission. Come and show us what you're talking about. And then allowed for additions to the building. We deleted language which considered the opinions of those in the neighborhood. I think felt a little uncomfortable. I think the issue here is that there's special permit criteria in the regulations, and certainly what the neighbors have to say could have influence on the commission. I don't think it needs to be called out in the regulations quite this way, et cetera. Provisions related to rooms to let, storage of recreational vehicles, human habitation of accessory structures, and then 3.9G, we talked about that earlier. This is the issue about the conversion to a two-family dwelling. And I think we indicated that we would take another look at that and come back to the commission with some additional suggestions. So that's an overview of section 3.0, which is residential districts and uses. I've made some notes here in terms of things for us to come back to the commission about. What's your sense overall? Feel we're moving in a positive direction?
I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I really think this is good.
Perfect. So I think we're probably late enough here tonight that our next meeting, which would be in August sometime, will pick up on section 4. Section 4 is business zones and uses. And this one, again, I think we consolidated, you may recall, we consolidated some of the business zones.
Yes.
Aaron,
I
did you?
sent that map, the series of 3 maps out again today, or Lisa did, excuse me, for your reference. So review that along with.
That was the GIS.
Yes.
Yes, there's 3 of them in that packet. Mhm.
So I think the three maps are the existing zoning, so you can check and confirm where zones are today. The resulting zoning map in terms of what they would be. I think we got rid of about half the zones or combined the zones together. And then the third map is the changes map. And so this is where you can now color code and say, oh, I see, transition business change to industrial or whatever else would have happened. Just so you're familiar with those changes.
Right. And one item just to compare the two as you're reading through the text, and you'll see some of our TS and TS2 zones were merged in the text of the regulations. They are titled Service Business East and West as proposed, and in the maps they're shown as Transition Business. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention so that you don't suffer some of the confusion that we have and some of the confusion that anyone who we have shared our regulations with have gone through. So yes, and in light of that also, locationally where these zones are, I know we show Service Business East in some areas on the west end of town, which also adds to some confusion.
Yeah.
So we may want to think about our naming a little bit of the zones as well.
Yeah.
Phil, let me highlight one other thing about the commercial zoning. One of the things that we should probably talk about right away is the question of drive-through restaurants. We have right now pending or almost pending 2 applications for changes in our zoning to allow drive-through restaurants in zones where we do not allow them today. And as you know, we just made an amendment a month or so ago to do that. So it's a real hot topic right now, and there's a lot of confusion as to what the commission's direction might be. So we want to urge all of you to think about that as part of our discussion of commercial zoning.
Homework.
So I think the next meeting is August 18th, and I'll follow through with George and Aaron and make sure we've got everything ready for that meeting.
That's
Okay.
terrific. Thank you very much, Glenn.
Thank
Thank
you.
The only other item that I wanted to bring up with respect to our next meeting. So our next meeting on August 4th is scheduled for a virtual meeting. However, we did want to allow the commission to kind of provide some feedback as The changes in the laws effective July 1st do allow the commission to continue virtual meetings through April of 2022. So we do have this option. And if you prefer this option, I think we'd like to have some consistency at least through the month, as opposed, especially for advertising and things with legal notices flipping back and forth of in-person versus virtual. That's just I think for simplicity.
I
But-
frankly, other than our meeting in the community center on the first 311 Whitfield, I think we get more people participating online than actually coming and showing up at a meeting.
Yeah, I think especially with regulations, it is helpful to screen share a little bit on that for visibility. It also does reduce some travel time for our consultant as well.
I think it's in general, it's easier to follow things when you can screen share.
Yeah.
Personally. So I'm in favor of virtual.
I'm in favor of virtual for the time being. I mean, I think we can kind of agree to revisit the issue maybe at the end of October and see how everyone's feeling about it then.
I would say even now with the spike in this Delta variant, huge convocations aren't going to behoove us.
Well, why don't we plan on that, Aaron? That we'll revisit the issue prior to the first meeting we have in November.
Okay, so we'll plan that to make sure we can work out advertising and things like that.
Great.
Excellent.
Did anyone have an opportunity to review the minutes?
Substantially correct.
Yes.
Chairman.
I did have one addition. Sorry, I don't even know if Lisa is still here, but I'll just state it for the record. Concerning the De Janeiro, I'm gonna get it wrong, but whatever the first application was, I had raised a question to George about the Guilford Preservation Society's letter and how they put forth kind of a community comprehensive plan approach process in the letter. And George had shared with us that this is, I think, maybe the only site in the town that actually has that, and that this would be, that particular development, if it moves forward, could be kind of the pilot for doing that type of planning process with communities. So I thought that was really great insertion from the Preservation Alliance. I'm sorry, I'm tired, I might be butchering their names, but I just wanted to try to get some inclusion of that discussion in the notes on the record.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Welcome.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes with the addition of Jamie's notes?
As amended, so moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Very good. Frank DeAndrea,
Aye.
Sean Cosgrove,
Aye.
Richard Wallace,
Yes.
Alan Brown,
Yes.
Jimmy Stein,
Yes.
Bill Freeman,
Aye.
Frank DeAndrea.
Aye again.
Thank you. And I shall also vote to
Aye.
approve the minutes.
Aye.
With no further business before the Planning and Zoning Commission, would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved to adjourn.
All
Second.
in favor, please raise your hand. Let the record show that the vote is unanimous. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.